Story 1. He never knocked, but my doormat was always wet. This happened to me in 2017, the first year I lived alone. I had just moved into a one-bedroom apartment in a converted old house on the edge of a small New England town. It was the kind of house with warped floors and windows that never fully sealed. Rent was cheap. My unit was on the ground floor, with its own private entrance at the side, a white wooden door, chipped around the bottom, with a faded welcome mat in front of it. That door became the center of everything. I moved in mid-October. The nights were getting colder. There were a few rainy days that month, but nothing consistent. That's what made it noticeable. The first time I touched the mat and felt that it was wet, I thought nothing of it. It had rained the day before. The grass still shimmered with dew, but it kept happening, even on dry nights, even when it hadn't rained for days. Sometimes the mat wasn't just damp, it was muddy. Not soaked, but smeared with faint streaks, like someone had pressed down on it with something that wasn't a shoe. I checked the overhang above the door, no leaks. I looked for drips from the gutter or splashes from the lawn sprinkler. There were none. It stayed dry around the mat. Only the center, the place someone would step or kneel, was wet. I started checking it every night before bed, and every morning too. By the second week, I began to dread stepping outside. I'd open the door slowly, half expecting to see someone standing there, but there never was. It became a ritual. I'd open the door, touch the mat with my hand, feel the cold moisture, and go back inside, confused, but with nothing to prove anything was wrong. I tried reasoning through it. Maybe animals, maybe condensation, maybe I was imagining how dry it had been, but I started writing it down. Dates, time, weather, moisture level. The weird part was, it was never soaked in the middle of the night, only in the morning. One time I stayed up late and checked the mat at 3 a.m. It was bone dry, but by 7 a.m. it was damp again. No footprints, no puddle. Just a wet, vaguely muddied rectangle outside my only door. It started to affect my sleep. I'd lie in bed listening to the wind, staring at the door across the living room. The lock was old and had some give to it. I pushed a chair in front of it just in case. I didn't tell anyone. What could I say? My doormat keeps getting wet? There was something about it that felt intrusive, intimate. Like someone was doing it on purpose, but just enough to avoid detection. One night, I set my phone to record video, propped in the corner behind the curtain. I aimed it at the door and left the porch light on. When I checked the footage the next day, it was completely useless. Around 3:14 a.m., the camera shook and slid off the windowsill. No one visible, just a flicker, like a breeze inside the room. The screen tilted down and recorded the carpet for 4 more hours. That morning, the mat was wetter than it had ever been. The texture changed, more grit, like crushed leaves mixed with soil. I crouched down and sniffed it. No smell, no sign of an animal, just cold moisture and silence. I started feeling watched, not all the time, but when I was near the door, I'd feel this pressure in my chest. Not fear, not yet, just that uneasy sense of being observed from too close a distance. I installed a cheap motion light. It triggered at random, a few flashes at 2 a.m., once at 4:30, but always when I was too tired to get up. By the end of November, I developed a small rash on my right hand, the one I always used to check the mat. Dry, irritated skin, almost like a burn. I wore gloves after that. Still, every morning I checked. Still damp, and always in the exact same spot. The worst part was, nothing ever happened. No break-in, no figure in the night, just the mat, just the water, and no one believed me. The whisper through the peephole, never louder than the fridge. By December, I was leaving the porch light on all night. It didn't help. I started sleeping on the couch, partly so I could be closer to the door, partly because I didn't like being in the bedroom anymore. There was something about the back wall that felt too thin. I remember the first night I heard the whisper. It was barely there, quieter than the hum of the refrigerator, fainter than the sound of the heat pipes knocking in the walls. It said my name. Once, slowly, like someone exhaling it. It was 3:57 a.m. I remember the exact time because I was staring at my phone, scrolling mindlessly to stay awake, my whole body locked up. I turned off the screen and sat still. The voice had come from the door, not outside, not inside. Just the thin space between the metal and the wood, as if it had passed through the peephole. I stood up and crossed the room. Slowly. The floor creaked under my weight. I didn't open the door. I didn't even look out. I just leaned close. Nothing. I waited, listened, and then another whisper. Not a word this time, just breath. I backed away, sat down, and stayed frozen until the sky turned blue. From then on, I kept a blanket on the couch and a light on in the kitchen. I stopped locking the bathroom door. I unplugged the fridge for 2 nights just to be sure it wasn't masking other sounds. It kept happening. Always around 4 a.m. Always my name. Never loud, never urgent, just casual. Like it was checking if I was still there. I taped over the peephole. I shoved a towel under the door crack, but it didn't matter. The sound still came. I called the landlord once to ask if there had been any break-ins. He said no. He also said the previous tenant left suddenly, broke lease early, same as me, just a few months before. I asked for their name. He said he didn't remember. I stopped asking after that. The whisper changed once. One night it said something different. Still quiet, still soft, but this time it said, "Come see." I didn't. I just turned off the light and laid on the floor, staring at the ceiling, heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. When the law waits for escalation, but escalation is ambient. Eventually, I called the police. I felt stupid doing it. Nothing had technically happened. No threats, no property damage, no person caught in the act. But I needed a record. The officer who came was polite, mid-30s, looked tired. I told him everything about the mat, the whisper, the late-night sounds. He nodded and said, "Keep a log." That's all he could suggest. So I did. I bought a cheap notebook and started writing everything down. Time, temperature, any strange sound, moisture levels, light flickers, even my dreams when I remembered them. I kept the journal under my bed, the only place I figured no one would look. I wrote in it every day for 2 weeks, pages filled with tiny notes. Then one morning I woke up and pulled the journal out. It was damp, warped. The pages stuck together slightly, but not open, still closed, still under the bed. But clearly somehow it had been wet. There were no leaks, no spills. I flipped through it slowly. None of the ink had run, but some of the newer entries were smudged, like someone had touched them with dirty hands before the paper dried. I stared at the mattress above it. There was no hole, no damage. I walked outside. The mat was dry for the first time in 3 months. But in the dirt beside the porch, someone had drawn a circle. Perfect, clean, one line. I didn't know what it meant. I still don't. That day, I packed a bag, told my landlord I was going away for the holidays. I never went back. The last time I drove by the house, it was listed for rent again. New coat of paint, same door, same mat. I parked across the street and waited until nightfall. Just after 3 a.m., the porch light flicked on by itself and stayed on until morning. I still don't know who was standing behind that door all those nights, but I know they never knocked, and somehow that was worse. Story 2. The friend request that knew my apartment number. This happened to me in 2019, when I was living alone in a mid-rise apartment building just outside of Seattle. I had just started a new job, doing remote contract work for a company I didn't have to visit in person. Most of my days were quiet. I rarely left the apartment except for groceries or a walk around the block. That isolation made it hard to track when things started to shift. The change was digital first and subtle. It started with a friend request. The profile had no photo, no posts, no mutual friends. Just a username that looked like randomly mashed letters and numbers, XO71 and 8FRX. I ignored it, deleted it even. But 2 hours later, the request came back. Different username, same blank profile. I deleted it again. Then it happened again the next day. And again the day after. I began blocking them. Each time the account would vanish, then reappear with a variation of the same format. No image, no details, just a request. What stood out was the timing. Every single request came within an hour of me returning home. No pattern I could find. Sometimes it was after I'd gone to the store. Once it was after I stepped outside to get the mail. I started keeping a list, tracking when the requests came in and what I'd been doing right before. It was always within 45 minutes of me returning to the apartment. Then came the photos. The first one appeared in my inbox from a throwaway email I didn't recognize. No subject line, just an attachment. It was a photo of my hallway, taken from the far end, pointed directly at my door. I thought it had to be a mistake, some kind of spam, but the file name was the exact date and time it was taken, down to the second. That night, I covered my peephole and put tape over the small door viewer. I barely slept. The next day, another friend request, another blank account. This time it came with a message, 1:03 p.m. That was the exact moment I'd gotten home from a walk. That evening, another email arrived. New address, same kind of attachment. This time, the photo was closer, angled slightly from the side, like it was taken by someone crouching near the elevator. The lens had a haze to it, like the photo was shot through foggy plastic or glass. But the focus was clear enough. My door, my unit number. The fear didn't come from the fact I was being watched. It came from how systematically it was being logged. Every image had metadata. Every request was time-stamped. The tracking wasn't chaotic or obsessed. It was clinical, quiet, like someone collecting data for a reason I couldn't see. I stopped using my phone's location settings. I changed all my passwords. I even switched to an older backup phone, but the requests kept coming, not through apps now, just emails, always with a photo, always closer. The fourth email was the worst. It showed the inside of my building's lobby, taken from behind the front desk. I'd never seen that angle before. It was a restricted area, locked to residents, which meant either someone had access or someone else did it for them. The hallway cameras were offline for maintenance, the property manager said. I asked how long they'd be down. She just shrugged and said, "It happens." I printed every email, every image. I highlighted the timestamps and brought it all to the local precinct. The officer behind the desk flipped through the papers without saying much. Then he said, "The only thing I still remember word for word, if they haven't made contact, it's not technically a crime." I asked what counted as contact. He didn't answer. The message with no sender ID, just one word, move. About a week after the lobby photo, I received a new message. It didn't come by email, or social media, or text. It showed up on my laptop while I was offline. I had been reviewing a project when the screen froze. For half a second, everything went dark. Then a single line appeared across the center of the display in white block letters. Move. No signature, no header, just the word. I yanked the Ethernet cable, shut the machine off. When I turned it back on, everything seemed normal again. No trace of the message, no open windows, just my desktop. But I didn't sleep that night. I brought the device to a tech repair place the next morning. I explained what happened. The guy at the counter said maybe it was a boot time prank, a malicious pop-up or corrupted program. Then he ran diagnostics and looked at me with a flat face. "There's no log of any remote activity," he said. "Your system was clean, not even connected when the screen went black." I asked if it was spoofed somehow. "Could be," he said. "Or it could have been local." Local. The word stayed with me the whole walk home. That night, I thought about the other tenants. I barely knew any of them. Most kept to themselves. There was one guy across the hall who used to nod at me in the elevator, but I hadn't seen him in weeks. I remembered that. I hadn't seen him in weeks. The next morning, I slipped a note under his door, just a casual check-in, asking if everything was okay. The note was still there by the afternoon. The building manager later told me the man in 4B had moved out, quietly, no notice, just left one night and didn't return. His unit was empty now. She smiled when she said it, like it wasn't unusual. No one had seen him leave. He hadn't posted about it. No goodbye, no truck, gone. That night a new email came in. This one had no image, just text. The body read, "He left just in time." No sender, no reply option. I sat in the dark for a long time, reading those 5 words over and over. I called the police again, a different officer this time. He said they'd look into it. I asked if they could trace the email. He called back 2 days later. "Nothing to trace," he said. The message was routed through a disposable node. No IP, no ISP footprint. Could be spoofing, could be local. Then he added, "You should think about staying with someone." I didn't have anyone nearby. Family was out of state. My closest friend had just moved for grad school. I stayed. But I stopped turning on my lights. Stalking by proxy, predictive presence and behavioral hijack. I began to change things. Without deciding to, I stopped walking near windows. I stopped checking the mail at night. I moved through the apartment like someone was following me. Not outside, but through each gesture, each hesitation. I stopped using the front door at all. I'd leave through the back stairwell instead, even though it was farther. I even taped a small paper square over my laptop's camera, just in case. But the messages adapted. They changed. They didn't tell me what to do anymore. They just confirmed what I was already doing. Like the next image. It arrived 3 days after the laptop message. It was a photo taken from outside my building, across the street, zoomed in through 2 layers of glass. You could barely make out anything, just shadows. But one of the shadows was mine. You could see my silhouette, standing in the corner of the living room, exactly where I had been the night before, away from the window, watching nothing. The photo was time-stamped. It was accurate down to the minute. I moved again, shifted my sleep schedule, started using different routes home. I ordered blackout curtains. I unplugged my router at night. Still, the emails came. Not every day, but enough to track me. Each one confirmed something I had just changed. If I shifted my couch, the next image would reflect that. If I moved my desk lamp, the next message would mention it. No threats, no commands, just updates. That's when I realized the pattern. They weren't watching in real time. They were watching ahead of time. The image of my silhouette in the living room, it was sent at 10:02 p.m., but I hadn't been standing there until nearly midnight. I checked my own logs, compared timestamps. The photo was 2 hours early. Another message arrived the next week, showing a receipt, a screenshot of a delivery I hadn't made yet, an order I hadn't even placed. Same store, same total. I placed the order that night. It was like whoever was watching had stopped following me and started thinking for me, or worse, making me think the way they expected. I brought it all to the police again. This time I wasn't asking for help. I was just leaving a paper trail, a record, a body of evidence they could look at when something worse happened. They took a statement, logged the files, but again, no crime, no break-in, no physical contact, no traceable sender, just patterns. I still remember the last message I received. It came at 3:43 a.m. Subject line, none. Attachment, none. Body, you only leave the lights off now. I know. I've seen it. I moved out the next day. Didn't give notice. Didn't pack everything. I just left. I got a new number, new email. I moved across the country. I still don't use overhead lights. And every few weeks, just before I go to sleep, I see a notification in my junk folder. Blank sender. No subject. I never open them, but I don't delete them either. Did you enjoy the content and it made a difference for you? Click on Super Thanks and support our work. Story 3. She was always exactly one step ahead. This started in 2022, shortly after I moved back to the city. I'd just ended a long-term relationship and was trying to reset my life. I took a job downtown, mid-level, data analyst. Nothing special, but it kept me busy. I rented a clean, unfurnished one-bedroom above a nail salon. Walk up, no buzzer. The kind of place where you hear the neighbors brushing their teeth through the walls. I hadn't spoken to Natalie in almost 3 years. We met in college. We dated for 5 months. It ended badly. No violence, no big betrayal. Just something off about the way she always knew too much. I thought it was just intensity at the time, maybe an over-attachment, but there was something else there, something calculating. She never asked questions. She just skipped ahead to the answer. After the breakup, we went completely no contact, blocked everything, moved on. I hadn't heard from her since, so when I found the first item, I didn't think of her. It was a small object, a dog-eared paperback I hadn't seen since high school. The Martian Chronicles, one I had underlined obsessively in the margins back then. I found it sitting in the stairwell right outside my apartment door. I picked it up, confused. I hadn't owned a copy of that book in over 10 years. The inside cover had my name written in pen, a very specific stylized M I used to draw in the margins of everything. I checked the back. There were 2 dried coffee stains that matched the ones from the original I lost back in 2012. It wasn't a coincidence. This was the same book, but that wasn't possible. I told myself maybe my parents had cleaned out the attic and mailed it to me. I texted my mom. She hadn't sent anything, hadn't seen the book in years. I moved past it, left it on the shelf, tried not to think about it. A week later, the next item appeared. This time it was a CD, a burned disc with no label, just the word Tuesday written in blue ink, the exact shade of blue I used for all my mix CDs back in middle school. I hadn't owned a CD player in years, but I still had an old portable drive. I plugged it in, pressed play. Every track was familiar, in a way that felt invasive. It wasn't a random playlist. These were the songs I used to listen to when I walked to school in 2006. The same sequence. Even the same ambient track I once downloaded from a fan site because it sounded cold. There's no way anyone could have recreated that from memory. Not even me. I didn't tell anyone. Who would I tell? Another week passed. Then the third item showed up. It was a drawing, pencil on yellowed paper, folded once. I found it on my pillow after coming home from work. The image was a sketch of a hallway, mine, drawn with precise shadow and angle. There was a small figure in the middle, seated on the floor, head down. I checked the windows, checked the lock. Nothing broken. I should have called the police, but the fear didn't feel urgent. It felt studied, like someone had tested how far they could push before I'd reach for help. The next object shattered me. It was a keychain, a cheap plastic red heart, cracked slightly on one edge. I hadn't seen it in almost a decade, not since I gave it to Natalie half as a joke on our second date. I bought it from a gas station. I remember making fun of it, calling it tacky enough to last. She'd kept it, and now it was back. No note, no name, just the object, placed carefully on my desk. Not in the hallway, not in the mail, inside. By then I had changed my locks, gotten a ring camera, added a latch to the inside. Still nothing on the footage, no alerts, no sound, just the keychain, sitting there. These weren't gestures, they were reminders. I still know you, I still map you. Every item she placed fit a memory I had never shared out loud. She was ahead of me, always. And the scariest part wasn't what she might do next. It was realizing I had no idea what the next memory would be. The moment he saw her reflection, but not her, I started sleeping in short bursts. 2, maybe 3 hours at a time. I kept the lights on. I unplugged everything when I left. Still, nothing helped. The sense of being shadowed didn't go away. She never reached out directly. No texts, no social media, no voice, just placement, objects in silence. That was her language. One night I had to drive out to the suburbs for a work errand. I stopped at a gas station halfway back. It was nearly midnight, and the air was cold enough to fog the windows. I stepped inside, grabbed a coffee, and headed for the counter. That's when it happened. I reached for the door, hand on the handle, and saw my own reflection. Behind me, just over my shoulder, stood a woman, still, slightly blurred by the glass, not moving forward, but spinning, very slowly, like a dancer pivoting on one foot. My breath caught. I turned fast. No one was there. Just empty floor, empty aisles, no sound of the door opening, no one behind me. I stepped back outside, heart pounding, looked around the lot, checked behind the pump. Nothing. But the image was still seared into my mind. She hadn't walked toward me. She had turned in place. Why? Why turn? It wasn't movement toward. It was disorientation, positioning, a kind of signal. Later that night, I looked up behavioral surveillance theory. I ended up on a forum thread about mirror behavior interruptions, rare stalking patterns where reflection is used instead of physical presence. The term used was proximal hallucination through mirrored spacing. In plain terms, people who learn to bypass your field of vision by letting you catch them just outside of it. That night, I left my hallway light off for the first time. I stared at the black square of the window for hours. Every so often, I caught myself imagining the turn. Just a silhouette, no forward motion, just the turn. The phenomenon of coincidence-engineered stalking. The final shift wasn't visual. It was algorithmic. It began subtly. The right ad at the wrong time. A product I'd only mentioned once, out loud, to a coworker, never typed. Then came the personalization. My Spotify recommendations changed, not drastically, just slightly enough. Old playlists I'd made in college started resurfacing, ones I'd forgotten about. Ones Natalie had once heard years ago when I left my laptop open. Then my email suggested contacts I hadn't seen in years. But all the suggestions had one thing in common. People who knew Natalie. People I hadn't spoken to since before the breakup. I deleted the cache, cleared everything. Factory reset my phone, changed devices. The ads still came. I mentioned this to a coworker and she laughed nervously, said maybe it was a coincidence. I smiled and nodded, but deep down, I knew. This wasn't targeting. This was engineering, not hacking, not brute force, but an emulation of me. Someone had learned to predict my inputs, simulate my behavior, and they were ahead. Always just one step ahead. The final envelope came on a Tuesday. It was left on my desk at work. No name, no return address, just a single piece of paper inside. A photo, a child, me, maybe 10 years old, but it was wrong. The image was aged up, my face reshaped to be older, mid-20s, but not as I was, as I would be. If I had been someone else, the structure of the face was mine, but the eyes weren't. The eyes were hers, the chin, the cheek shape. Everything was slightly off. Not a mirror image, but a blended one. As if someone had taken both our childhood photos and layered them until they produced a third. A version of me that had never existed, one that only she had imagined. And now, built. Not in flesh, not in data, but in the space between. The model. I took the envelope and walked straight to HR. I didn't explain. I didn't ask for advice. I just said I needed to leave early for personal reasons. I never went back. I changed numbers, moved again, this time across state lines. But some things still happen. I'll be halfway through a sentence and forget what I was saying. I'll reach for my keys and find something else in my pocket. A gum wrapper with my old college nickname written in tiny, shaky pen. And sometimes, just sometimes when I pass a dark window, I don't see myself. I see the version she made, smiling, just one step ahead.